Dr. Mitchell again, here talking to you some more about variables and assignments. In this video, we're going to be looking at how we can store values inside of our variables with the assignment operator, as well as how we can change the values in a variable, but ultimately what's output is the last thing we did. So what are we learning today? So we are going to focus on learning how to determine the value of a variable as a result of the assignment. We're going to be using and looking at how we can use the assignment operator, which looks different depending on which format you're using. And also how no matter how much we change the value in our variables, what will be displayed is the last thing we did with that variable. So just to recap, a variable is an abstraction that is inside of a program that can hold a value. In the previous video, I demonstrated this using boxes. Those boxes were abstractions that held values, just like our variables do. So how do I actually store values in our variable? You see here I have the assignment operator to store the value 100 inside of my high score variable. So that way I can set my high score to be 100. In my next example, I have the text Ashley. I know it's text because it's inside of quotation marks. And that value or information is stored inside of my first name variable. Since my is raining variable is intended to be a boolean variable to check whether or not it's raining, I can store the value true because again, I'm in Florida and it rains a lot here. So I'm going to set that to true and store that value there. And then my phone number, I'm storing the value or the text 555-0101 inside of my phone number variable. And again, I'm storing this as text and not as an integer because I'm not wanting to do math with this phone number. So let's look at an example within a code. So in this particular program, I am trying to store and replace the high score I currently had with the new score that I got in a game. So what you see on the first line, I have a current score variable, which is going to get the value 10. So current score will now store the value 10 inside of its little box. On the next line, I have the high score variable, which is going to get the same value that I have stored inside of current score and basically copy that over into my high score variable. So high score now also contains the value 10. My current score variable, I decided played the game again, and this time I got 7. So now I'm going to store the value 7 inside of current score. Notice I did not change high score. Nothing changes to high score. It still has the same value that I gave it in the previous line. So when I display high score, it's going to display the value 10 because that was the last thing that was done to high score was store that value 10 inside of it. However, if I call the display procedure to display the value inside of current score, then it's going to display 7 because that is the latest value that was stored inside of that variable. So let's get some practice on our own. Take a moment to look at this program. We want to see what is displayed after running this particular code segment. Pause the video and take a moment to work this out. So on the first line of this little code segment, I stored the value 4 inside of my num1 variable. On the next line, I stored the value 6 inside of my num2 variable. Then on the next line, I stored the value that I had inside of num2 inside of num1. So num1 is basically, I copied that over. Num1 no longer has 4, it now has 6 because that is what num2 had. So when I call the display procedure to show what is stored inside of num1, it will display the value 6, And same thing, if I call the display procedure to show what is inside the variable num2, it will show the value 6 as well. Okay, here's another example. Here I have 3 numbers that I'm working with. Take a moment to pause the video and work out to determine what is displayed after running this code segment. So in this example, I start off with the variable num1, and I'm storing the value 25 inside of that box or that variable. For num2, I'm going to store the value 15. For num3, I'm going to give it the value 30. Now things get a little tricky. Num2 is going to get the value that I have stored currently in my num3 variable. So num3 currently has 30. So I'm now going to store the value 30 inside of num2. Now I'm going to change the value that I have in num3 to be the same value that I have in num1. So num1 currently has the value 25. So I'm going to give that a copy of that value over to num3 so it also contains the value 25. Num1 is also going to get a change, and it's going to store the value that I have stored in num2 inside of that num1 box. So num1 is now going to become 30. So now I'm going to call the display procedure to show what's stored inside of each of these variables. So what's inside of num1? I have the value 30 displayed. Inside of num2, when I call the display procedure, I'm going to get the value 30 displayed again. And then when I call the display procedure to see what's inside of the num3 variable, I have the value 25. So what do we take away? So we now see how to determine what is stored in our variables as a result of using our assignment. The assignment operator will let us store values inside of a variable or even kind of replace what's currently in there. But ultimately, what is output onto our actual program or into our program is whatever that final value is that was stored in that variable. So thanks. I will see you again soon.